Do you yearn for travel that involves outdoor adventure and learning? I do. I also have a passion for all things farming and agriculture. I've traveled to exotic jungles to learn about growing chocolate. I even once owned my own organic vegetable and sunflower farm. And now I'm planning my journey back to agriculture. Agritourism, defined as travel that involves some type of agricultural experience. Agritourism is all about entertaining. But the marketing strategist in me knows that, at its core, agritourism is really about educating, and education affects change. My future farm needs to deliver a profound experience to all of its visitors. It needs to educate people about food, health, and climate. Join me to learn from experienced agritourism farmers and entrepreneurs and help me build my future farm strategy. And who knows, maybe one day soon you'll find yourself in a tropical jungle cutting open cacao pods with a machete, or savoring an outdoor plant-to-plate community dinner with 100 guests at a farm in Illinois. So let's tap into the agritourist in you. Emma and John are two amazing people. They are smart, business-minded, and genuinely committed to their mission. I really fell in love with their story and their mission. They own a farm sanctuary in Florida, just going on 5 years now. Before selling their house and moving from city life in Minneapolis, they took the time to volunteer at a local farm sanctuary to ensure that this is something they really wanted to commit to, as owning a farm sanctuary or any type of animal rescue is an everyday, all hours of the day commitment. The answer was a definitive yes from both of them, and they set out to find the perfect property in a warmer climate. They found a beautiful 30-acre property close to the University of Florida with a unique setting for farm animals and tourists alike, including natural springs, which I found to be pretty amazing on a property in Florida. However, there is a more significant underlying mission that these beautiful farm animals are just a part of. That mission is to create awareness around where our food is coming from, how it is being produced, and encouraging people to enjoy a more plant-based lifestyle. This is what will ultimately save these animals. Farm sanctuaries represent a super small percentage of the lives saved, but Emma and John want people to understand that every one of us can save a farm animal's life without having to own a farm sanctuary. All we have to do is modify how and what we consume each and every day. That's all it takes. Join me, your Agritourist podcast host, Jen Ross, to hear more about Emma and John's compelling and truly inspirational story. So how are you? How are the animals?
We're doing great. Yeah, it's a beautiful spring day here, about 75 degrees and, sunny and perfect. But we're coming into our hot season, so we're just trying to soak it all in right now while it's perfect. And it's been raining recently, so the cows have fresh grass to eat, and the sheep are very excited. And the sheep, they also were just sheared for the season, so once a year they get a big haircut. And so they had obviously a bunch of wool from over the winter, but now they look like half the size, but they're frisky and they're running around and they're having a great time. So everybody's doing great.
Excellent. So I listened to a lot of the University of Florida video that you produced, which gave me a lot of information about you guys and your story and the whole transition. So first, let's go back. Minneapolis, is that where you're from?
Yeah, we lived there forever. I was in a suburb called Rosemont. Emma was from Edina, and then we lived in the city for a long time, and we're just city people, and we loved it.
What did you do then?
So, and I'm still a videographer. So I film weddings and events, and that sort of helps pay the bills around here, along with our amazing donors and supporters and people that come and stay at the farm and the Airbnb. And then Emma was a nurse, and now she's basically a nurse and caregiver to the animals. So it's been cool to see that transition. And even though I'm probably going to talk a little bit more today, she deserves all the credit because she makes everything happen here. So she's amazing.
Okay, Emma, I do want to hear from you though.
Yeah.
So how did you go from Minneapolis to Florida? That's like a big question of mine. It just seems was there a connection to Florida? Like what was that about?
No, and as a matter of fact, I sort of had to eat my words because I have a sister that after high school moved down to Florida, and I always gave her a hard time for being a Floridian. I thought we were so cool up in the north. And we originally thought Peacefield was going to be in Hawaii. We even bought land at one point in Maui, and started that process. And we knew it was going to be expensive, but it ended up being even crazier than we originally thought. And so then we went back to the drawing board and said, okay, where kind of across the United States would this make the most sense? And the only sort of selfish part was after shoveling snow for 35 years, we just said, okay, no more snow, even though we love Minnesota so much and we still have family there. So we kind of looked from Atlanta below across the United States, and I probably looked at every 10 plus acre parcel on Zillow, and kept coming back to North Central Florida. At the time, you could get a lot of land for your money. We feel like we're in the middle of nowhere, but we're only 10 minutes to the University of Florida. And so it's a college town. So we get a lot of our volunteers from there. And so it's sort of, it has kind of the best of all things. And we didn't know anything about Gainesville when we moved here. And we feel like we got so lucky because it's such a cool town.
Yeah, it's a big change. So just take me back. I obviously listened to your story, but I want people to understand that,
Yeah.
what, how did you make that transition? I know you both ran, and then you both became vegan. I am vegan,
Oh,
and
awesome.
I love it. I also entered it for health reasons, not,
Yeah.
originally. I'm always been an animal lover. Always visited animal sanctuaries and had animals and rehabbed animals and saw them on the side of the street and saved them.
Yeah.
But for some reason, the connection wasn't there until, But tell me
Yeah.
about the journey a bit because, you're a nurse. I know you're still doing the video work, which I visited your website. It's pretty amazing. And there was a video on there about Hawaii that I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah.
But, what made you do this? Like, what brings someone to doing this and actually doing it? Like, a lot of people have the vision. I'd
Right.
love to have an animal sanctuary, but realistically, it's a huge challenge. And, this is a lifelong thing. I mean, these are your animals, they're your pets,
Yes. Well, and then that really hit home when we rescued a group of sheep that came with a mini donkey. Her name is Charlotte. And when we had the vet out, sort of doing her initial checkup, um, at some point it was like, because the sheep live to be about 10 to 12. And I was like, how long will Charlotte live? And the vet's like, oh, maybe 35, 40 years. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to be like 80 years old and have Charlotte here. So that did sort of hit home. Yeah, it is. It's a commitment for sure. But back to the origin story. So we originally also went vegan for our health. We wrote a book called How Not to Die. That's Dr. Greger's new book behind us, How Not to Age. And we had always been animal lovers, of course. I would go to the state fair and I'd see the baby pigs and I'd think they're so cute. And same with the baby cows, and never really wanting to like entertain what that meant between what I was eating and myself being an animal lover, and sort of just kind of kept them in separate boxes and basically did that my whole life. Always, if I could, moving a turtle off the road, but on my way to Chipotle to eat a chicken. So that contradiction I just lived with. And there's no judgment for people that haven't gone vegan yet, because I wasn't vegan for most of my life, and kind of
Same
just trying
here.
to keep those worlds separate in the back of my mind, because I think we all know, like right beneath the surface, something's not quite right, but we just kind of don't want to think about it because food is the most, one of the most personal things, and it's one of the best joys that we have in life. And just any sort of change to that can at first seem very threatening. Although I will say, now I eat a much wider variety of food than I ever did before, and I feel like I enjoy food in a much more meaningful way than I did before. So food is definitely still a huge part of our lives, and that's one of the reasons we run so much, is so that we can eat and enjoy all the amazing vegan food. But back to about 10 years ago, we read How Not to Die when it first came out, and we're just sort of blown away that all of this stuff, it seemed like, all of these studies, maybe they just came out and that's why we hadn't heard about them. But if you look at the references that Dr. Greger is talking about, these studies, a lot of this information we've known for decades. But because sort of the solution to a lot of things is to eat more plants and vegetables, people, it doesn't really make the news every night. And so we decided just to give it a try and see how we felt. We were runners before, like you mentioned. we would do half marathons, maybe an occasional marathon every once in a while. And after we would do those big runs, we would be limping around for 1 to 2 weeks after, because we had really stressed our bodies, and that sort of made sense to us. We did this big exertion, and now we're going to be sore. We didn't initially make the connection, but we went whole food plant-based. We're feeling better, and then we would do these long runs, and then a couple days later, I'd be like, I think I can go for another run. So we realized, oh, we're healing a lot quicker. Which makes sense. It's one of the sort of the legal forms of doping now in professional athletes is whole food plant-based. So that's been cool to see that they've caught on as well. But we originally just did it for our health, felt those benefits. And then one day my mom called and she said, "What do you want for your birthday?" I was like 35 at the time. And I was like, I don't need another pair of socks or, whatever. So I don't need anything. I'm okay. And then I quickly thought about it and I said, you know what? How about for this can be my birthday, Christmas present, all the holidays together. Why don't you just read How Not to Die? We've sort of been giving it a try. It's felt amazing, and see what you think. Never in a million years did I think she was going to actually read it. She's working multiple jobs. She's very busy. Food was always an afterthought for us growing up. It was Hamburger Helper. It was, whatever. It was quick and easy stuff. And she called about a month later, and we were talking about stuff, and she said, "Oh, and by the way, I feel so much better." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she said, I read How Not to Die, did the Audible book, and I would listen to it on my way to and from work. And we've been giving it a try, and I feel so much better. So long story short, within a relatively short period of time, she got off all her medications, lost 60 pounds, basically became a new person, like had new life. And begrudgingly, that spread to my dad. And so he at first was like, like we all are, resistant to change. But now he's as big as advocate as we are. Like he set the most consecutive days for his Orange Theory fitness studio in Minnesota, and basically also became a new person. And so we saw anybody that did this whole food plant-based lifestyle essentially just become a new person, feel 20 years younger, etc.
What do you
And
think? Why did your mom receive it at that point? Do you think there was something going on?
I have, what's interesting is her mom had just passed away from dementia. And it took, she, in addition to working multiple jobs, she would, in between gigs, after work, be doing as much of her care as she could, always at the nursing home, basically like being the hands and feet of an angel. Like it was the coolest thing that I've ever seen. But it added, years to her life. You could just tell it was like taking such a toll on her. And after, grandma passed away, she sort of was in this place of like, okay, maybe I am open to something new. Like I have, even though she still was working multiple jobs, she felt like she had a lot more time because she wasn't doing grandma stuff. And so I think maybe that was the perfect space. And we feel so lucky because that did, I think, give her those years back, maybe that she lost in all of that hard work. And now she's just like a butterfly. They recently retired. They live at Peacefield. She's fluttering around, helping with the animals, making treats for visitors and volunteers that come.
Oh, that's
So
terrific. So she's with you guys. That's terrific that she's
she's with
down
us.
there.
And then her grandkids that my sister that lives in Florida are 3 hours away. So she's always with
Okay.
them. And so, yeah, it's sort of given her a new life, which has been very cool to see. But yeah, it's because sometimes, you think you have somebody in your life that you love so much and you're experiencing this thing and you want to pass this gift on to them. But if it's not the right time, it can't always be accepted. But yeah, so we
Right.
got really lucky for sure.
Good. Okay.
Um, and so sorry, so yeah, we saw that
No.
transition, and that was just a huge seed that was planted in our life that we were like, oh my gosh, this thing is such a gift. So anything that we can do to pay it forward, let's do it. And then sort of a little bit of a sad turn. We were on a road trip shortly sort of after that with some friends, and we decided to go kind of do our own thing in the morning. They took their kids to a trampoline park, and one of the dads broke his neck and died in front of his children. And obviously that's, one of the most horrific things you can think of. And so we sort of helped take care of the kids that week as best we could as they were making arrangements and figuring out life. And we had lost grandparents before, but never a contemporary. This guy his name was Rick, and he was just the most life-filled guy. Like just again, one of those people that you're like, you would just seek time to be around because just being in their presence would fill you up, and they were the best. And so when he passed away, it sort of threw us into the spiral of like, oh my gosh, nothing in life is guaranteed. Each day could be our last. What sort of secret dream are we pushing off that maybe we can do now and just give it a shot? Because it's we're all gonna die someday. And so we might as well just give this a shot if we can. And it's sort of a disservice to your dreams if you can do them and don't do them, because some people aren't in the position to do them. And so all of this stuff sort of culminated in Peacefield. And the answer to our questions over that sort of mourning period was, we just want to help animals and help people and sort of just pay this gift forward. And we had been to a farm sanctuary in Maui called Leilani Farm Sanctuary many years ago.
That's the video that you
Yeah.
have. Yes, I watched that.
So
Yep.
we met Laura Lee and we met all the animals there. And if you're ever in Hawaii, or it's worth it just to make a trip there, she is also just an angel. And we went there before we were vegan. And just to be able to sit with a pig or a turkey in a place where, and I think the difference between it when we were at the state fair during it is we could really like take in their presence and be with them, because we knew that they were going to live out their life. Again, we weren't vegan yet, so we hadn't really made all these connections, but it was a huge thing. So when we had this, tragedy happen with Rick, we were like, we just want to do that. And I think because Maui was in our minds of when we had met Laura Lee, we said, and we want to do it in Maui, and Maui's paradise. And so
Wait, which one of you actually said it out loud?
To start Peacefield?
Yeah. Like who actually okay.
He's the big dreamer. He's the entrepreneur.
Oh, someone, yeah. Usually someone says it.
It was John. And I was like, okay, let's try.
Yeah, and we had been city people forever. We were in our dream house. We loved our life. Like, it was perfect. And so when we started talking about it, we're like, okay, this sounds amazing. We want to do it, but let's just really make sure we want to do it, because, maybe we do love farm animals and we want to help them, but I don't know if we want to take care of them every day. Like, that's a very different thing. And so there's an amazing farm sanctuary in Minnesota. And why am I freaking Spring Farm Sanctuary? Robin and Buck, they're the best people in the world. And they also had a sort of similar epiphany, just wanting to help animals and people. And most farm sanctuaries, they're amazing, but they just, for kind of budget costs and space requirements, they have to be sort of pretty far outside of a city. And so it's harder for folks that are closer to a city center to visit them. Robin and Spring Farm is amazing because it's like 15 minutes outside of the Twin Cities. And it's just this beautiful pastoral setting. And so we started volunteering there. And we volunteered there for a little bit over a year, leading tours, taking care of animals, just helping where we could. And we're like, oh, we really do want to do this. And then we put our house on the market and found Peacefield down here in Gainesville. And again, just we feel like we're so lucky to be doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
So what sold you on this piece of property? I'm sure you looked around, and what was it about this piece of property?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I was on Zillow every second, stressing myself out, being like, is this one the right place? Is this? And we actually were on a trip down to this area to see a property. And we were, we had flown down from Minnesota. We were driving to it. And the realtor called and said, sorry to let you know, it just sold. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, it just sold. Like, what are we going to do? This trip was a waste. We, wasted all this money to come down here. And then we pulled up Zillow, and Emma actually saw this place, and it looks a little funky, a little quirky. It's inside is sort of like a modern cabin. Now it's like perfect. I won't want to be anywhere else in the world. But at the time, you're sort of throwing a dart at the map, and you're like, I don't know, what is Gainesville, Florida? Like, what sort of area are we in? But we got so lucky, and we fell in love. One of the really cool things is the previous owner, his wife was a master gardener. So there's like beautiful,
Nice.
landscaping everywhere. And so the animals, it's a really cool combination of just beauty. And then it really does live up to its name, Peacefield. It's very peaceful, serene. And we have about 50 animals now, which seems crazy. And we're like about a week away from our 5-year anniversary of rolling in the gate for the first time.
Congratulations. That's
Thank you.
amazing.
Yeah.
So when you reflect on the 5 years, what do you think? How do you reflect on it?
The
On
first
this
year
anniversary?
almost killed us. I was gonna pack my bags and go back to Minnesota. I was homesick and was like, what did we sign up for?
Yeah, having dinner at midnight, being like, what just happened today? Our first rescue, Toby, he's a potbelly pig. His first night he escaped. We go out to the field. There's no Toby. We're like, we're such failures. We started this whole thing, and our first night we lost our first rescue. We did. We got Toby back. He was fine.
Still here.
He's still here. And then, we had been from Minnesota. And so, we have our winters there that you have to get through. And then in Florida, you have your summers that you need to get through, where it's 100 degrees. It's very warm. And so just learning the seasons, the animals, our routine, also like working together every day and just getting into a pattern. And then we've also been hugely helped by sanctuaries that are around us. So within 30 miles of us, there's amazing sanctuaries. So Critter Creek Farm Sanctuary is actually the biggest cow sanctuary in the world. So they have a couple hundred acres not far from us. Chris and Aaron Ammerman run that. They're incredible. And then there are several other sage sanctuaries. It's like a micro sanctuary. That's actually where they helped us get Toby. And then Live Freely Sanctuary with Mike and Tanya, also not too far from us. They know how to do everything. So like if a pump breaks or if a fence, whatever, they're here to show us how to do it. And then, we can sort of pass that on and help others too. So it's been cool to see the community of sanctuaries come together, even in this little corner of Gainesville, Florida.
That's great to hear. So when you first got there, there was a house on the property. Like what was there?
So in this area, and I think in many areas, it probably depends by county, but in this area, if you have a certain number of farm animals, you get a tax break. And so a lot of people in this area will have enough fencing so they can have a few cows grazing their land because it makes your property taxes a little bit less. And so the property was owned by a professor at the University of Florida, and it's 30 acres. But he had the land, and so he fenced off a few sections, and so he could have animals grazing. So I would say about half was here, and then about half we've added. And it's different when you have animals for grazing versus when you have animals that you want to take care of. So we've built them extra shelters and other resources that they have out there too. So yeah, that was a process of trying to just grow slowly and add things as we could. As we rescued cows, then we would add another, shelter for them to be in. Same as we got more pigs, a pig house. The chickens, the chicken houses were here, but they weren't really predator safe. So we added higher fencing and, we sort of spruce things up. So it was about a half and half thing. And we're adding things every day. Even though we sort of feel like we know what we're doing now, we've been here 5 years. We got a call from our neighbor that he thought one of our cows was in his yard. And I was like, there's no way. And then we look out and we're like, you know what? I don't see Otis. And sure enough, Otis escaped. And so one of our amazing volunteers, Wade, has been helping us put barbed wire up around Peacefield now so that we can, keep everyone in. So it's always a learning process.
That's a consistent story. A friend of mine who I did an interview with also, she owns a dog and cat rescue on Long Island for over 24 years, but she recently purchased land in Massachusetts. It's called Berkshire Farm Sanctuary. And she was saying, she goes, the 600-pound pig broke out. So she's not used to that. So she's like, oh man.
Well, and everyone's good now, and it's funny to laugh now. But at the time, our neighbor, who's a very sweet man, he doesn't really know what we're up to. He's sort of in his own thing, and he's like, one of your bulls escaped. Do you want me just to put them down for you? And we're like, what? Like, what are you talking about? No, like we'll come, and sure enough, we got him back. But yeah, so there's never a dull day. Like right now, everything's like peaceful and great, but who knows what's going on out there. So you never know.
Before I forget, where does the name come from? I mean, I can intuitively figure that out, but I'd love you to talk about that.
So I don't know why, but many, many years ago, I was watching the HBO series John Adams. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I haven't seen it, but I remember it. Yes.
It's amazing. And I didn't, just was enjoying it. And at one point, and this was many, many years ago, so I don't know why it stuck with me, but John Adams, like, how Jefferson had Monticello, John Adams' home where he went to kind of retire, he named Peacefield because there was a bunch of war and stuff, and he just wanted a peaceful place to be, and he called it Peacefield, and that name just stuck with me, and I was like, oh, that's a really cool name. And so when this many years later came up, I was like, that sort of makes sense for what we want to do. So yeah, it's kind of different, but Peacefield.
Emma, you liked that name?
I loved it. Yeah.
Okay, great.
And we
were actually in a sauna at an Airbnb in northern Minnesota. And that's when he was like, I think I like the name Peacefield.
Yeah.
Before we had ever, like, that was very beginning stages. I was like, yeah, that sounds great.
And we had been sort of, we've done yoga together for a while, and I don't know, just peace and I don't know, balance and all that stuff. So it
I
seemed
love
to make
it.
sense. Yeah.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
So tell me about, okay, so people can come visit. Tell me about how do you sustain this? This is a big operation. It's animals, they constantly need care, all types of care. I know, from a financial perspective, but obviously that leads into, you're bringing people on. There's that whole agritourism component. And
Yeah.
I know you have the Airbnb. So tell me about all the things that you do to help sustain Peacefield.
So great question. There's a few different pieces. The biggest one you're looking at right here, this is Emma. So no one here takes a salary. And so that's how we're able to just keep our, costs as low as possible. If we had to pay her for all that she does, it would be a lot more expensive. But so the nice thing about being all volunteer, even though different models are great, and so it's not to take anything away, but when somebody gives us $1 here, 100% of it goes to the animals. So that's cool to be able to say. And then we also end up being the largest contributors financially, just to kind of keep things running. But we have amazing donors and supporters through all of the social media stuff, and then donors that give monthly. And then one of the more recent big, huge things is the Airbnb. So when we moved here, there was a separate structure. It was very rough. It was sort of in the back of a barn. It was more like camping. But I said, let's finish it out, and then we'll have a place for family and friends to stay. And so we did that. It was awesome. And then I said, you know what? Why don't we put it on Airbnb, and we'll see if anybody takes us up on it. But knowing that they might not, because we would have to have some special requirements. So even though, again, there's no judgment for folks that aren't vegan yet, but we say, while you're here, you just can't bring in any animal products because it would feel weird to be grilling some burgers in front of the cow pasture. It just wouldn't make sense. Even though everyone's on their journey, just while you're here, we need you to be vegan. And so it's laid out in the description of the Airbnb, and then we double check when people request to book, just saying, make sure you read that. And I didn't think we would I thought we'd get some awesome vegans every once in a while, but no one else would be here. It's been almost, packed with mostly non-vegans, which has been so cool because we're able to sort of spread the message, show them what we're up to. And then usually their kids are crying in the parking lot when it's time to go. And they've all said, this has made such a difference, or it was way easier than we thought. And then we've had some folks that have gone fully vegan right after, and then other folks that have, slowly, gradually made the progress to a more plant-based lifestyle. But it's been a really cool place because it's a revenue center for Peacefield, but it's also a huge evangelism tool to let people experience what it is, what it means to like live with animals. And even if you spend a day or two here, you start to notice personalities. You're like, oh yeah, Charlotte, she's friskier, Otis, he's friends with Lenny. You can see things. And then once those wall breaks down, you start to realize, oh, they're just like our cats and dogs, and that's sort of the secret, I think, that maybe we want to keep in the back of our minds as we go about our days and grocery shop and eat. We don't really want to think about that. But if you spend time with any of these creatures, once an animal feels that they have their needs met and that they're safe, they can kind of relax. And then all of a sudden their personality comes out. So it's crazy to say, but chickens have a personality. They have friends. They have things they like. They have things they don't like. They have some are like to go to bed early. Some are a little bit more free, all of that stuff. And so once you, just like with your cats and dogs, spend some time with them, you're like, oh, we're just all individuals. And so it's been, again, a cool way to show people that in person.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, there's that they look at their cat or dog and obviously the personalities shine, but they don't make that same connection to a cow or a pig
Totally.
or a goat. And it's so frustrating sometimes because these animals are amazing. So if I rent your Airbnb, do I get to then basically I get to experience and help out? What happens at that, like if I rent your Airbnb?
Yeah, so you're not required to do any work. We have some very sweet people that show up and they're like, "Where's the pitchfork? I'm going to go scoop some, cow pies." And that's, absolutely not required. Some people want to do it just because it feels good, and it does, it is fun to be in service of animals. Like there is something very cool about that these are the least of these that people they're all happy and healthy now, knock on wood, but some have some very, very dark origin stories. And so to be able to serve them is a very cool thing. And it's sort of, it feels like a little bit of a spiritual gift to do that. And Emma gets to do that every day. And sometimes we take it for granted if we're in a hurry or we're stressed, whatever, but it's an honor to be able to do it for them. And so, but not required at all. How they do, anybody that comes here, of course, we'll give them a tour. So they get to hear everybody's story. And, we tell them the most dangerous thing here is once you ask a vegan questions, we might never stop talking. So, but we do make sure to give everybody their space as well, because we want Peacefield to live up to its name and make sure that they have, their privacy and their time to relax. We actually had a couple that came here for almost 2 weeks to do a silent retreat. And we told them, we can't guarantee that the animals will be silent, but, we'll certainly be mindful of that. And so it's kind of all different walks of life, families, groups. We'll give them tours. We'll show you how to feed the animals. We have a lot of people that come, and even though they're coming to be our guests, they'll have loaded up at Publix with strawberries for the chickens and, watermelon for the pigs and little treats for everybody. Again, not required at all, but is sort of a fun bonus part of being here, is that you can be on vacation. And then, we also have some people that and we have good reviews now on Airbnb, and we just have some people that are here because their son or daughter is graduating at the University of Florida, or we didn't know this when we moved here, but we're in sort of an area that has a lot of natural springs. They're beautiful. They're like one of the seven wonders of the world.
Wow.
You'll be walking in the middle of a forest, and all of a sudden there's like this turquoise blue water that's perfect. And there's
in Florida?
In Florida.
I never knew that.
With manatees swimming, and even we're very inland, but they make their way all the way in. And it's
that's
stunning.
Amazing.
Yeah. So we'll have people that come just for the springs as well.
Excellent. So what other things are you doing to bring in other sources of income? So you said you have donors and you have the Airbnb. Are you doing any education or anything like that?
So we have a few things. Emma probably does the most heavy lifting with our social media. She's amazing between Instagram, Facebook, just sharing stories. And it's always a balance of, when you go vegan and when you kind of know about what happens to animals sort of in the food industry, you can kind of go down a very dark sort of spiral because it's horrific. It's like an onion. The more you peel back, the worse it gets as you learn about this stuff. But we found that, at least for our personalities, that wasn't really persuasive with our friends and family, and it didn't seem effective, even though there are certainly the things that are very sad about what we're talking about are true. So unfortunately, people could sort of shut down and don't want to hear them. And so we've intentionally tried to keep things more positive and uplifting. And so Emma does that in our social media. I think we have over 16,000 followers on Instagram, which maybe doesn't seem like that much in the world of influencers and whatever, but it's a good core following, and they've been amazing. And we try to keep things positive, and most of the time, just show everybody what they're up to. But if there is somebody all of a sudden does have an unexpected vet bill, we'll say, hey, if you want to help, get Toby's tusks trimmed or, whatever, we'll put that need out, and people will help in addition to our amazing monthly donors. And then once a week, we also have yoga at the farm. So we bring in a professional instructor from one of the yoga studios, and we'll usually have around 20 to 30, mostly college students, but also just sort of neighbors of the community come. And it's a totally free class. My mom makes cookies, but then people can leave a donation if they want. And that's actually been super helpful. And then speaking at UF has been another thing, just to sort of get the word out there. And then our connection with the University of Florida has been great, because now a sorority or fraternity or different honor organizations and clubs will need a certain number of volunteer hours. And so they'll call up and they'll say, hey, we've got 30 guys. What do you need done? And it's not the most glamorous work, but, it's picking up cow poop or pulling weeds or whatever, but it helps a ton. So that's been hugely helpful as well.
And it's also a great thing for them. You're getting that connection made, even if it's just a peer with what you're doing. And
totally. And like we visited Leilani Farm Sanctuary long before we went vegan, but it was a huge seed that was planted that just had to grow and took time. And so hopefully we're doing that. We love the stories of people coming here and they make a change that are vegan, and it's amazing. But we also know that we're planting a ton of seeds along the way as well, of things that hopefully will blossom in that direction.
Yeah. You had said in that, I just want to touch on the social media piece, because I know you had mentioned that in the University of Florida video about,
Oh
when
yeah.
you posted that thing on the duck and saving
Yeah.
those ducks versus when you start posting the tough stuff, and
Yeah.
it's hard, it's hard, but your 16,000 followers is significant, because they're organic followers and they're dedicated to your cause. So they're going to be there for you. Because a lot of people might have a lot more followers, but they're not dedicated to their cause. So I kudos to you guys for doing that, Emma, especially you.
Yeah, no, she
But so
crushes it.
social media can go many ways. So it's tough. It's a tough
Totally.
balance.
And shout out to Moby. Moby's one of our most active followers, and it's been
Excellent.
amazing. So he'll boost stuff or get the word out there as well. So that's been cool to have that connection.
And I know you had said in that video, Peacefield is a place for animals, but it is a place for humans as well. And just, you want to just expand on that for a sec?
Well, I think that, a lot of times vegans sort of get a bad rap because people will say, what about this suffering of this group of people or that, like we have bigger problems. Like, why are you worried about this? And I think there's a few different levels to that. One, I think if we could get everybody to see the value and the individuality of a chicken, I think that would solve basically all the other problems we have in the world. If we can see the dignity again in the least of these, I think we would for sure be able to see that in each other. So that's sort of one level of it. But then the other one is, as humans, we're animals as well. And we have crazy lives and things to deal with and, have been abused or have, whatever. And so we also need a place just to come and be healthy and breathe clean air and, have a sense of freedom and acceptance and get the things that we need. And so hopefully Peacefield feels like that for people that were here. It was a coincidence, but when we first moved here, before we had much of it set up, one of the truck drivers that delivered some furniture from Minnesota for us, he came in and he was an older guy and he was definitely overweight and he sort of braced himself as he got out of the truck and was holding himself just to stand up because he probably sits in a truck all day. And he kind of looked around and he goes, "Wow, it's so peaceful here." And then just like, it was like so crazy that he was really our first visitor. And that was the first thing that he said. And so really having a place for people just to kind of stop and to get out of, I don't know, the matrix or normal life or whatever you want to call it, but have that place of peace as well. And we realize that, we live here every day. And so we're very lucky and we can sometimes take it for granted because we'll have people that come from very nice places that are just like in awe of, again, having a little space, having clean air, having happy animals. It does something for people. And we feel really lucky to be able to be here, but then also to share that with folks.
Excellent. So you have 50 animals. What is next? Are you at a good capacity right now? What's next for the sanctuary?
So this is a tricky area because usually sanctuaries are started by people, and I'm not trying to give us a compliment, but they're usually obviously started by people with big hearts that want to help. And so one of the pitfalls can be that you just get in over your head very
Yeah.
quickly. Because when we first started Peacefield, I was, we had Toby, and I was like, I don't know where we're gonna get more animals from, but we'll see what happens. And once the word is out there, we get a call almost every other day, I'm sorry to say, of somebody with a need to place an animal, and we do the best that we can. If we can't take them, we'll try to, network with other, and that's where social media is amazing and has been a huge benefit, is because we're able to connect with so many sanctuaries of like, hey, we're maxed out on roosters, but we can take hens. If you know anybody that needs hens, let us know, but could you take these roosters, etc. And so that's been super helpful. But we've realized, so even though it looks like a sanctuary's job is to save animals, our real job is to get people to go vegan. And that's sort of, we trick people to come here with the Airbnb, with yoga, with having cool stuff, tours, cooking events, but it's really to get people to go vegan. And the reason is that, it's trying to basically mop up the floor while the faucet's still turned on. You can't do both at the same time. We would be full in a day for just, a couple hours worth of the animals that it would be consumed in a Chick-fil-A, drive through for a few, like it's just the amount is unthinkable. And so we tell people that'll come here and they'll say, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. You've rescued these 50 animals. You guys are heroes, blah, 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 whatever. Again, very nice. Thank you. Appreciative. However, we'll tell them you have much more control than we do. You personally can save we've saved 50 here. That's amazing. You personally will save thousands of animals if you can kind of go in a more plant-based direction over your life and do something way bigger than we ever could here. And so knowing it, being able to help people realize they're so empowered. This is one of the things where, sometimes things are happening across the world and we feel like they're out of control or they're out of our power, but we want to help make change. This is one of the things that we are in 1,000% control. And, every time we go to the grocery store or sit down to eat, we can sort of dictate the kind of world that we want to create and have an immediate impact, like right away. And so that's a long answer to your question. So at about 50 animals right now, we feel that we're pretty good. There are some areas where, if we got a call today for some hens, we've got some room for hens. Pigs we're sort of maxed out on. We could definitely take a few more sheep. And so it depends on the species. But one of the things that we need to be cognizant of is, one, not getting in over our head, because the sad fact is most farm sanctuaries end up closing, which is very sad. And we just want to be as sustainable as we can. And then also just help people realize that they're also in control of, what happens to animals just as much as we are.
Yep. I liked one of the things you said on that video. Again, once we know better, do better. That was very impactful.
Yeah. And that's, it's tricky because, again, I think we're most of us are animal lovers at heart. And so it's in us. And we almost don't want to know better, like we'll tell people, oh my gosh, did you know this statistic, or did you know what happens to baby chicks, or, whatever. And they're like, don't tell me, or I don't want to see it. Because we know, there's no way that, all of this just works and everybody's happy and healthy and, it's painless and all that stuff. And so, but yeah, it's sort of, one of again, before we were vegan, I just one day saw a video. It was a happy video of a pig running around on a field. There was a pig that had been rescued and she was let outside for the first time where she could touch grass. And she was jumping around like my dogs. And I'm like, what?
That was Judy the pig, I think.
Well, Judy was our dog. Yeah.
And then I think
pig in the video was called Freedom. So if you look at, if you
and then Wilbur.
And then, we have Wilbur, who did that same sort of jumping around when he came here.
Which was an amazing sight. I mean, that tapped at my heart. I was just like, that freedom, that.
There's been a few animals that, some you let in, they're just like, oh, the chickens, they're just kind of do chicken stuff. But the cows, we got 3 cows from Farm Sanctuary up in New York, like kind of the big original first farm sanctuary. They all came down and they sort of did the same sort of Wilbur run when they got here. They started leaping around for joy, like kind of like they knew they had hit the jackpot, and Wilbur did the same thing. So it's very cool to see that.
Have you met Michael Greger at all?
That is a great question. Yeah. And so
because you talked about the book and now you have the book behind you. So I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Have you connected into that world? Because that's a very powerful world.
Yeah. So one of the benefits, which Emma just mentioned, that if you do come to the Airbnb, you'll get a free copy of How Not to Die. That's a gift, part of that every guest.
Very nice. Very nice gift.
And then we followed him around to a few different live events where we can see him in person and hear him speak. And the craziest thing is, he's sort of become like our Lady Gaga or our, and he's just the sweetest little unassuming doctor, and he's amazing. But he is our, ultra celebrity rock star, because he's done so much for us. And the coolest part, if you don't know anything about him, is he should be a multi-millionaire. He should be on a yacht, his best-selling book, etc. He donates everything he makes to charity. He works for a nonprofit, And any speaking fees, book stuff, again, he just donates and just wants to help people. And again, pay the gift forward that his grandma was saved with a whole food plant-based diet. And so that's one of the reasons, he doesn't have any pills or potions to sell. You can sort of take what he's saying a little bit more seriously because there's no ulterior motive or no financial motive, I guess. And so we've gone to meet him. And so we feel like just Dr. Greger, maniacs. But then it's reaffirming or reassuring, I guess, when we go to see him, because there'll be a line of people and we'll get up to see him. And we've met him before, and maybe he's being nice, but he's acting as if maybe he remembers us. But we'll tell him, you give him your whole life story in 30 seconds. Dr. Greger, like, you changed our life. My mom got off all our medication. We started Peacefield. We have 50 animals. We can't thank you enough. You're our hero, etc. And you feel like a crazy person, but he takes it in. He takes a selfie with you. He says, thank you, signs your book. But then the coolest part is you step to the side, the next person just as crazy. They're like, oh my God, Dr. Greger, you did this and my aunt went this and whatever. And then you see, and there's this line of hundreds of people that are just pouring out just gratitude for him. And so he is a national treasure, and we love him and can't thank him enough for what he's done for our family and our lives. So for sure.
Yeah, I've heard him speak on a few different podcasts. I never read his book, but I've definitely heard him speak. I love it. It's amazing.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say he released this new book, How Not to Age, which is also amazing. So I highly recommend that. He reads his audiobooks. So if you're busy, that's a good way to fit it in, because they are, they're big, thick books. But then I think this current book tour, he has like 200 speaking dates just this year. And wow. I'm not kidding. When he stays in line until every single person had their book signed and he's talked to them. And he's a force. It's very cool. For sure.
Excellent. So I have to ask you, who's your favorite who have you made, Emma and John, separately? What animal holds that special connection to you?
I've talked way too much, so Emma.
They're all special and I love them all.
But someone must stand out for some reason.
So Felix is the first baby cow that we've rescued. We rescued 3 cows who were kind of not one yet, but they were a little bit older, and they had bonded with their caregivers at Farm Sanctuary in New York, who had bottle fed them and took care of them. And they arrived here and they were happy and healthy. And then a couple months after that, there was another call for a cow, this time in Florida. And his mom gave birth to him. He rolled down a hill into a pond, still in his amniotic birth sac. And the neighbor, who had been keeping an eye on these cows because they were being neglected and not fed well, and she would actually spend her own time and money to feed them, she saw this all go down. She ran out, saved him from the pond, and brought him to the owner. He didn't want to spend the time or money to take care of Felix. So he was like, you can just have him. So she brought him home and nursed him back to health, did all of the things you needed to do to help him have the best chance at life. She did an amazing job, and she took care of him for 8 weeks with her goats. And she kind of had a moment of, he needs a cow family. I have a full-time job. He needs cow family that he can live his whole life with. And at that point, she had just insanely bonded with him, her and her husband. And they weren't vegan or vegetarian at the time. They gave me a call, and I was like, yes, we can take him. And she came up with her husband, and they had him in the back of their van. There's an adorable picture of Felix, baby little guy, in the back of their van, his first day at Peacefield. And she taught me how to bottle feed him, how to do all the things, because he was my first baby cow I ever got to bottle feed. So now he thinks I'm his mom, and now he's full grown. He's the only cow who has horns. He has huge horns, but it is the sweetest creature. He is the sweetest creature, and it's the sweetest thing. If he sees me, he will come over. Like, they're herd animals. They want to spend their whole lives together. So yeah, Felix forever. He's my baby, even though he's huge now and he bosses everyone else around, because I got to bottle feed him. So huge shout out to Shannon. And then amazing cherry on top to the story is that couple that saved him, they went vegan because of Felix. And they have just like a lot of photos of him in their house, and her husband made a little frame for her with a photo of Felix that I had taken at Peacefield of who rescued who, because they got off all, again, major success story, got off all their medications, lost a ton of weight. They look 40 years younger, new lease on life, all thanks to this gorgeous baby cow who's now full grown and just living his confident, happy life at Peacefield. So yeah, they're all
I
amazing,
love it.
but Felix is my baby forever.
I
If you've
figured there
ever
was one.
Yeah.
if you've ever seen Game of Thrones, where there's the Khaleesi and she's got her dragons, it's very similar here because you have this beautiful blonde woman who walks around who just controls these 1,000-pound animals that will come running and like listen to her, but they've got horns and they weigh 1,000 pounds. So that's been very cool to see. I would say sort of this is one of the things that we knew was going to be part of the deal, but you don't really think about it a lot. But when you have 50 animals, some from some pretty rough starts, there's going to be a life and death cycle. And so I'm going to talk about Jan. Jan has since passed away, but she was a chicken and she was just super friendly. Not that we love or don't love animals based on how friendly they are, but you can kind of have a little bit more of a connection with the ones that, want to be picked up or greet visitors and stuff. And she was just the little welcoming committee, just a little ball of joy, just always waddling around, seeing what people are up to. And she got sick. And then chickens sort of, because they're prey animals, they really try to hide any sort of weakness or sickness, even from each other, because they don't want to be kicked out of the flock. And so they basically just kind of grin and grip it with adrenaline as long as they can. And by the time you realize something's wrong, sometimes it's too late. And so once we sort of noticed Jan, not really coming out of the house in the morning to, peck around with the other girls for their food and whatever. So you start to notice again, because you see their routine every day and it's easy to spot like, oh, that's a little bit different or somebody's a little bit off. And so Jan, once an animal gets sick, depending on the animal, but Jan got to come live in the house with us. And, we would, when we'd watch Netflix at night or whatever, she'd be sitting on the couch next to us and just hanging out. And we sort of got to a point where we had to feed her orally with a syringe every day. And so I mention all that just because I really had a chance to get to know her. And as sad as it was when we did have to bury her and give her a little funeral, it was an honor because we had gotten to know who she was and basically got to see her to the end with as much dignity and love as we could. And when we talk about Peacefield also sort of being a sanctuary for people, it is for us too, because, we live, and maybe your viewers who aren't, they haven't thought about this stuff or thought about a farm sanctuary veganism, just to hear the idea of having a funeral for a chicken or to have a chicken live with you just seems crazy. And I would have thought the same thing too, because we'll be in line at Publix, maybe getting a medication for a chicken. But there's somebody, with a whole roasted chicken in their bag for $4.99. And so again, there's no judgment, but it's a sanctuary for us as well here, because we get to live in this very special world where, I'm not as religious as I used to be. I'd say we're more spiritual now, but it feels like when animals are sort of just living happy and free and everybody has what they need, it feels like this is what things should be, sort of like a Garden of Eden feel, where the lion would lay with the lamb and everyone just sort of is at peace. And so that's sort of what we try to be up to. We're not perfect. Nobody's perfect and there's no judgment, but that's what we're trying to create.
And who cooks?
Oh, no, no, that's both of us. Well, the craziest thing, so now that my parents have retired and we built them a house in the corner of one of the fields, and so they get to live here too and help with us.
She cooks, mom cooks.
Yeah, she is.
So that's perfect.
Incredible. And again, growing up, it was Cheez-Its and Hamburger Helper and Pringles and whatever. Like we were busy. Food was an afterthought. Now she is like the best whole food plant-based cook, like any dessert, whatever you can think of. She's always whipping up something. And so she's amazing. So we all benefit from that.
John
Excellent.
is an amazing cook. He leads our plant-based cooking classes. And we joke that I make ingredients. Like I'll make like brown rice or sweet potatoes or quinoa or black beans or garbanzo beans, and that's it. And I'll be happy eating that. But like I'm not the best at making a full-on recipe. He's really good at that.
And we've had several folks that have come to our whole food plant-based cooking classes that went totally vegan, and again, seemed like brand new people. So that's been very cool to see.
Well, you've convinced me I'm coming to visit. So I'm like,
Anytime.
I honestly, it's just, what you've done is amazing. And I love the way you've presented it. It's not, because I know the whole vegan conversation. I mean, when I use the word plant-based a lot because the word vegan just immediately people put up, like stay back, I don't want to know. When I use plant-based, it's a completely different conversation. But it's funny, people just they're curious, but they don't want to cross that line. So
Yeah.
it's interesting around me. My husband and I are both plant-based. My kids are not. I have 3 kids, but I cook, they'll eat it,
Yeah.
but the foundation is there. They know, the education's there. It's just a matter of them making their choices. My one daughter is studying economics and sustainability in college, and she's like, "Mom, you have to." She gave me some book. It was like, she goes, "This is a book." It was a vegan book. She's like, "You have to read this," and I kind of found it interesting that she's
Oh,
telling me
wow.
I have to read it. So I was like, "Great, I definitely will." I'm like, I was totally supportive, obviously, but she hasn't made that transition. But I know it's there. She's on the verge. I think when she was reading the book, you again, sometimes you intuitively know what's going on, but when you actually read and see it, that it is very shocking.
Oh,
You don't
yeah.
realize the brutality. I think people think it's done in a humane way because that's how it's marketed.
Yeah.
But that piece is the piece that I think she was so shocked about. So we'll see what happens with my kids. But like I said, I educate and I do. So you hope that they receive that, and when they're ready to make their choices, they will.
For
But
sure. And you've planted way more seeds than you know. And,
Yeah.
sometimes kids just have to do their own thing for a while
yeah,
and then they come back around like,
absolutely,
oh, mom was right.
especially teenagers.
Yeah, for
So,
sure. For sure.
but thank you so much for what you do.
Oh, of
It's
course.
amazing.
Wait to do
So
what you do someday.
yes, I can't either.
You'll have to let us
No, I'm
know.
excited.
Yeah.
We'll follow on the
I
podcast.
definitely will. Well, like I'm serious. I'm the type that I will book your
Yeah.
Airbnb
Yeah.
because number one, I've never been to that part of Florida, and I'm always up for, I just think these types of things, meeting people like you, and people don't know. It's hard to find places like
Yeah.
this, and I think I want to expose places like this because these are meaningful opportunities for people to connect on a level that you can't when you just go on a typical vacation to a hotel or
Totally.
whatever. So I really want to expose what you're doing. So thank you again.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking the time.
I hope our AgriTourist podcast prompts you to think more about where your food comes from, whether it be your vegetables, fruits, meats, and even those sweet treats. Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast with someone you think may truly benefit from or be inspired by it. Visit us at agra-tourist.com. Until next time.